Yesterday, Republicans made one of the most disgraceful and concerning decisions we have seen in recent history, and that is a high bar to clear for the Republican Party, because last night they confirmed Pete Hegseth, someone who is wholly unqualified to be Secretary of Defense. Now, there are a long list of all of the reasons and scandals why Pete Hegseth is unqualified, both in character and ability, but Republicans look past that. And when Pete Hegseth was sworn in today, he and JD Vance both were confronted with all of Hegseth's scandals. And JD Vance's response? It wasn't much. It was him crumbling in utter confusion because he could not defend the indefensible in Pete Hegseth, and we are going to get into that moment. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really means the world to me. Now, before we get into that moment of Vance crumbling, I first want to check out a speech on the Senate floor from yesterday from Senator Adam Schiff decrying this decision to confirm Pete Hegseth.
General Matthew Ridgway was one of the greatest military minds of the 20th century. His service spanned decades and continents. And after the end of his service as Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, he was recruited to join the Wise Men, a group of retired diplomats, politicians, and generals who assembled time to give their advice to President Lyndon Johnson. He knew then, as we know today, what makes effective leadership in both war and peace, on the front lines and on the home front. He said that there is far more to professional fitness than knowledge and skill in the technology and tools of war. These the officer must have, but the final test of his ability is not in what he knows, but in what he is. There is no substitute, he said, for those innate qualities which we generally refer to as character. My fellow senators, put aside the nominee's lack of knowledge and lack of experience to prepare him for a role of this magnitude. We must also consider this nominee's absence of character becoming of a Secretary of Defense. You heard it in his confirmation hearings. You've heard it described by my colleagues today. You've seen it on television, read about it in the materials that we have been provided that demonstrates Mr. Hegseth's unfitness for this office. Character matters. It does. It still does. And no amount of tough talk on TV or bromides about a warrior spirit can make up for a distinct lack of character. General Omar Bradley, the first ever chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the longest serving active duty service member in the history of the United States Armed Forces, wrote to the Infantry School Quarterly in April of 1953. He said that leadership in a democratic army means fairness, not harshness, understanding, not weakness, justice, not license, humaneness, not intolerance, generosity, not selfishness, pride, not egotism. Think about those qualities. Think about whether the nominee we consider today resembles even just one of them. Certainly not generosity. Certainly not humanity. Certainly not understanding. Certainly not. I understand that politics can be complicated, but there is nothing complicated about this. Our service members are watching. Their families who fear that their loved ones may be sent to battle are watching. Our adversaries are watching. There's an inscription down the hall that says it plainly, what we should consider in this moment. Our government, conceived in freedom and purchased with blood, can be preserved only by constant vigilance. Constant vigilance. The vote before us today is about Mr. Hegseth, but it is also about all of us. What do we stand for? Are we being vigilant in the defense of our country? This candidate is not qualified. This candidate is not experienced. This candidate lacks judgment. This candidate lacks the character we need to lead this department at a time of great national peril. He is simply the wrong one for the job. I urge a no vote, and I yield back.
Pete Hegseth is a man with zero character and even fewer qualifications for the job he currently holds. Someone who should be nowhere near the Pentagon and is yet now leading it up. It is disgraceful, it is chilling, it is scary that this is how much MAGA has fallen in line. We should always expect them to continue to go lower, and as Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. are yet to be confirmed, I expect that they will continue to just keep on going down and down and down, because they don't actually care about character. They don't. And they don't actually care to defend their actions. That's what happened with JD Vance today. When he was asked a question by a reporter about how any woman in the military could trust Pete Hegseth, he just ended up crumbling.
All right, I guess that's it. Any questions?
Why should women in the armed service trust you?
Guys, let me answer that for the new secretary. All people in our armed services should trust him because he looks out for them and he's going to fight for them. And he's going to make sure that we have the kind of military that we can all be proud in, that we can all be proud of, and that, again, when we send it to do a job, we do it well, we do it quickly, and then we get the hell out. And that's what Secretary Hegseth is going to bring to the Department of Defense. Anything else?
Are you worried about any of the nominees coming really close to the line as we saw with Hegseth last night?
You know, as I learned with the Buckeyes just a week ago, when you win the championship, you don't give a damn what the score was. We won the championship on this one. We've got a great Secretary of Defense. We're proud of him, and he's going to do a great job. Thank you all. Take care.
Such a non-answer from JD, what he's come to be famous for. And I love the moment. I guess I don't love. It's an interesting moment when JD Vance is asked that question, how could any woman in the military trust Pete Hegseth? And he kind of looks over at Pete, and Hegseth's like, don't ask me. He's like, I can't answer that. And JD's like, blah, garbage, lies, deceit, nonsense. Ohio State football. It's like, they've got nothing. They know this is a joke. It's a joke. He's not even a Fox host. He's a weekend part-time host, and now he's the Secretary of Defense. It still says media personality in his Twitter bio. That's who he is. It's sad. And on the topic of trust, how can anyone trust Pete Hegseth? How? This is a man, like we said, with no character, who consistently lies. And when he was confronted with those lies, he was kind of like JD Vance, crumbling. In a clip that we should continue to play, now that he is the Secretary of Defense, from Tim Kaine right here.
I want to return to the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged, fully investigated, and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime. That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared?
Senator,
how is that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she was, and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
it was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything?
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
Again,
how do you explain your judgment?
Completely false charges against me.
You
fully investigated, and I was completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So
He's
you
talking
can't,
about a hypothetical.
so you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge
And
you
it was
cheat, but
fully
you acknowledge
investigated.
that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
It really feels hard to imagine that we could get lower than this. But I guess it's still a possibility in this Trump administration. But it is our job to not only point out how unqualified Pete Hegseth is, certainly that's important, but as was said recently, it's important to differentiate between what is unpopular with voters and what is a priority. Donald Trump does a lot of things that are unpopular. Some of those things aren't priorities, and that's unfortunate. I wish the incredibly unpopular things he does were a little bit more important to people, but sometimes they're not. Pete Hegseth being a Fox host, probably unpopular, maybe not a priority. People will say, oh, well, he was a veteran, he served, so I guess he must be qualified. What we have to drive home is why Pete Hegseth is there, why Donald Trump is making all of these decisions. But these decisions are not focused on making our country better, but serving his TV conception of what government is. That this is all a big joke to Donald Trump. It's not about lowering your costs. It's not about improving the military. It's not about keeping you and your family safe, because Pete Hegseth sure as hell cannot do that. It's about Donald Trump putting on a show, calling out woke. That is the message that we need to make sure resonates. And it's what we're going to be talking about on this show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. You can leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.